Hi, Peter Boyles, and welcome back to another shoot here on our 710 KNUS studios that are right down the hall, and I'm going to be there, of course, Saturday morning. This coming Saturday, we're going to spend the entire show on the Kennedy assassination, the new releases, and everything that goes with that mystery. In the meantime, the world is on fire. And when I thought about this show, I think of no one else better than Dr. Tim Furnish. Dr. Furnish was with us years and years and years on the radio side, author of many books, was in the military, and a good man. So welcome back to the shoot. This is your second one to Dr. Furnish. There you are, sir. Good morning.
Thanks, Peter. It's like my kids say, it's been a minute.
Now, we talked about this, and I promised that we could do it. Your son plays football on one of his teammates.
Right.
Tim, if you would.
Last week in Louisville, in the game in Louisville, they had a player, helmet-to-helmet contact, had to be carted off the field, and he had to have spine surgery last week. And they say he's walked some, so it looks like he's not going to be paralyzed. But his name is Paris Jones, Perris Jones. And if your viewers and listeners would please pray for that boy, that would be wonderful.
That's great. One of the things that, as somebody that loves to read, and a couple of times in the Middle East, and I say the understanding of what is happening is often lost. How do you historically look at what's gone on? And do most people is a bad term, but most people really don't have any understanding on how all of this began. So you're a pretty good country historian, if you would.
Well, like everything in the Middle East, Pete, it's part religious and part political. And it's really hard to separate the two, right? Some people try to boil it down to just Sunni versus Shia or Israel versus the Muslims, but it's not that simple. It's really not that simple. The main instigator of the problems we have right now is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran has these aspirations of leading the Islamic world. They have ever since 1979. And the problem from their perspective, the problem from their stance, is that they are a Shia country. And although, most Muslims are Sunni, so they are Shia countries.
And also, they're not Arabs, right?
And they're not Arabs. Yes, good point. They're Persians, not Arabs, and people forget that. Yeah, three major ethnic groups in the Middle East: Arabs, Persians, and Turks. And they all have a little different take on things, even though they are all Muslim. But in this case, a lot of it is religious. In the respect of what Iran's trying to do, they're trying to be acknowledged as a leader of the Islamic world. And ever since Khomeini led the revolution in '79, sort of the tip of that spear has been their support for the Palestinians, which again a bit ironic because the Palestinians, most 99% of them are not Shia, they're Sunni. And in fact, a substantial minority of Palestinians are Christians, by the way.
That's right. Well, that's absolutely right.
Something like 8 to 10%, not so much in Gaza, but more in the West Bank. But basically, Iran is trying to stir the pot. Iran is arming everybody that surrounds all the non-state actors that surround Israel, particularly Hamas and Hezbollah, and then further away down in Yemen, and I actually have an article about this coming out today. They're also funding the Houthis down in Yemen, who are also Shia, but a little different kind. So basically, what this boils down to, there's two dimensions to this, really two big dimensions to this. One is, as I said, Iran's trying to use the Palestinian issue. They use it basically as a club to beat the Arab countries. You don't support the Palestinians. And a lot of the Arabs don't anymore. They're tired of them. I mean, they've been, the famous phrase, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They've been offered half a loaf or more for many years. They won't take it. Donald Trump came up with a wonderful plan before he went out of office for the predicated on hotels. Big surprise, right? But it was predicated on the idea of creating an infrastructure and a tourism industry for the Palestinians, and they rejected it out of hand, of course. So one part of this is Iran using the Palestinians to attack Israel, partly to get at the Arabs, and partly because part of the revolutionary rhetoric and logic is hatred of Zionism and Jews. And the other part of this is there's a big sort of geopolitical struggle going on between the three major players in the region, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. So that's part of it too.
That sets the table. Do the Iranians have a legitimate complaint, a bitch, if you would, against the West for what happened with the Shah and everything that happened in the aftermath.
Right. Yeah, right. Going back to the 50s when Mossadegh was overthrown,
Yeah.
and then the United States and Britain, and particularly the United States, supported the Shah.
Or
But
replace it. Yeah.
yeah, right. They put him back in power after he was
Right.
overthrown, basically. Right. You're right. They do. There are legitimate Iranian complaints about particularly American and British,
Hmm.
and to a lesser extent Soviet, but that's not an issue anymore. But American and British, meddling in their internal affairs.
Oh,
That's certainly true. Um, they can't really blame the Israelis for that, however. So that what they do is, of course, in their perspective, and this is they talk about this all the time. There's the great Satan and the little Satan.
yeah.
Great Satan, of course, is us.
Yeah.
Akbar America, death to America in Persian, and then the little Satan is Israel, and also there's this perspective of the near versus the far enemy, which is something that Bin Laden used, but also the Iranians have sort of adopted it. They can't really strike at us very well, but they can strike at what they see as our main ally in the Middle East, which is Israel. But no, you're right. They do have legitimate complaints,
Oh,
but yeah, I'm not sure that that's why they back Hamas.
well, I just finished, and I didn't realize it was out there. The letter to the Americans, written by Osama, and the list of grievances. I'd read the list of grievances before, but the Israelis are not at the top of the list.
Right.
And it's back to your notion of or the idea or the truth of the big and little Satans. But the Arab world, seemingly to me, is Division Street, except when it comes to the Palestinians, and then they all seem to unite. Does that hold? Yeah.
I would say that's not entirely true because
All
the
right.
Saudis and the Israelis were about this close to signing a peace treaty before this happened.
Until.
Yeah, this is one of the major reasons for it because the Saudis, although Mohammed bin Salman is basically running the country now, his father's more decrepit
Yeah.
than our president, um, which is saying something, isn't it?
Woo.
But Mohammed bin Salman and a lot of the younger Saudi leadership realizes that they got no beef with Israel. Israel hasn't bothered them in years, and Israel, if you leave Israel alone, Israel will leave you alone. So they were close to that, and also the Turks. Erdogan was making overtures to Israel
What?
again. And so now,
Until
until
I'll give you
October 7th.
my example. I was able to be at the end of the first Gulf War. I was there as a media geek, and Saddam's firing Scuds into Israel, and his thinking later, when you read it, was if the Israelis attack, then the coalition will dissolve, and these people will then, regardless, will turn on Israel.
Right.
And he did his level best. And from my reading and listening, the Israelis were sitting canopies up, getting ready to go downtown Baghdad, and Herbert Walker Bush paid them off not to strike, because it seems to be the unifying thread that runs through since 47, 48.
Yeah, in that respect, you're right. Yeah, but basically, an Arab leader cannot be seen as critical or not supporting the Palestinians when they're fighting with Israel. Yes, I would agree.
Sadat's a good example.
Yeah, right,
After Camp David, he's a dead man.
right.
So,
But notice, remember, under Trump, we went from 2 countries that had peace treaties with Israel to 6.
yes, oh yeah.
None of them got offed, right?
No,
But
but this what happened, this crazy, and I think it's more like a Tet offensive in October, is much like February of '68, but everybody pulls back now, and everybody's waiting,
right.
and now the U.S. is striking into Syria, and
Right.
Hezbollah is launching rockets. I mean, I've talked about this. It's a tripwire. Somebody's going to step on the wrong wire, Doctor.
They might. I mean, especially when, we have basically a president that doesn't know what day of the week it is. I mean, it's a very scary situation.
Who's calling those shots? Who's sending carrier fleets?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's Biden though. Do you? I mean, there are all these rumors about, Obama's running the show from behind the scenes. I mean, if he's not directly involved, it's certainly people that worked for him before.
But I mean, this is, and also everybody now seems to forget the sideshow, Ukraine.
Right.
And
Which is one reason I think that Iran goaded Hamas to do this now, because Russia is, I'm not sure, a
no,
lot
no,
allied, sort of on the side of Iran and Hamas here, and this gets Ukraine off the headlines, off the front pages.
but even more so in like a global perspective, Joe Biden has been for the last, what, 16 months, 17, 18 months, has been screwing with Vladimir Putin, good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, they are. We are. And now are they playing the same role back? Putin, the Iranians, whomever.
The
That
Chinese too.
oh,
Yeah.
one of my great fears is the Chinese decide it's showtime in Taiwan, because now now that's a three front war. That so, but in terms of power perspectives, are they in their minds not doing back to us what, quote, we did to them?
Oh, because I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
The Russians in particular, yes.
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 Yeah. So one of the things I thought about, and I love this line, or historians, and I forget, maybe you, Trevor Roper, said, there is no such thing as tomorrow. It is simply yesterday repeating itself. What do you do with that?
On the Santayana thing, right? Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Yeah.
Better yet.
Yeah.
So now what?
Israel is going to see this through because, in terms of death, the death toll, this has been worse for them than anything since what, the 47-48 war.
Yeah.
So they have to see this through. I mean, on the other, also the Palestinians in Gaza, as you know, Pete, maybe a lot of your listeners don't. I mean, although a lot of them support Hamas, they all don't support Hamas.
No.
And these people got nowhere to go. Egypt doesn't want them because Hamas is the militant Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, or I should say more militant branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Egyptians have had their run-ins with Muslim Brotherhood, and they don't like them. They hate the Muslim Brotherhood. The Saudis hate the Muslim Brotherhood. And so, for instance, when Israel says you have to get out of Gaza, well, but Egypt doesn't let them in. So where do those people go?
Well, that's happened to them before too. It's like I watch this and think to myself, the repetitiveness of this again and again, back to, and I read the, so maybe you call it the Arab perspective on what happened to them back to the time of Lawrence and the fall of the Ottomans. We in this country, and you've proven this point dozens of times with me, we collectively don't read history. And one of the points of Lao Tzu or von Clausewitz, you better know who they are. You better sure as hell know what they're thinking. Do you think that most people in this country have no clue what they think or do?
Most people don't. I mean, this includes people in the government.
Oh, the worst place, and the media.
Yes,
and the media.
The media is just clueless, right? They take sides automatically.
Yeah.
Really understand what's going on. I mean, I understand what Israel has to do, and of course they do. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean that the Palestinians don't have any
legitimate,
any legitimate points. They do.
I agree. So how do we balance that, Doctor? I mean, it's been a struggle for me. I know one history and I know the other history, and sometimes they clash and sometimes they parallel.
Right.
What are we to do?
You're quoting people from history. Was it? I can't remember. I always think it's attributed to Kissinger, but it's either Kissinger or Mark Twain. No, just kidding. Everything's Mark Twain, right? Yeah. Great powers don't have friends; they have interests.
Yeah, that's right.
And we need to keep that in mind. I mean, you can't run. So many people on both sides, frankly, do this. Republicans and Democrats do this. Both sides of the aisle. They act like we're buddies with certain countries. And I'm like, no, we're not buddies. We have national interests. But of course, particularly for the Democrats and the left, to speak of national interests is is verboten, right? We have to
Yeah,
look at everything globally. I mean, like immigration, whatever it is. But I'm like,
yeah,
no, at some point we have to look at things from our national interest because we
right.
can't control the whole world. We can't do everything, especially when we're $32 trillion in debt. So we have to pick and choose. The biggest thing, the biggest issue, the biggest problem I think right now is not even really Israel Hamas, but it's Iran. And why the Biden administration, if I may quote the Bible, like a dog returning to its vomit, keeps resurrecting that utterly ridiculous Obama kiss up to Iran policy. You cannot trust anything the Ayatollahs say. And we keep like releasing money and giving them money, and no, they're going to use it for humanitarians. No, they're not. They're building missiles with it.
That money was frozen by Jimmy Carter,
Jimmy Carter money.
and he froze that money, and then he wouldn't let the Shah in
Right. Right.
as to try and make it okay, which of course it wasn't. And then my understanding of reading is the the government in Iran wanted to buy replacement defense stuff, jets, anything, and they were going because of U.S. policy. They were going to go to the Germans, the French, and perhaps even the Russians and whomever. And so the war machine, if you would, pressures Barack Obama to. So what they did was they released that money that was held since the time of Jimmy Carter.
Right.
And as I said, one of the great moments that I'd love to have seen it is when they sent John Kerry to meet with the mullahs. And I say, the mullahs had him coming in the front door. Do you believe? I mean, I think they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if anybody plays 4D chess, it's the Ayatollahs. For gosh
Oh,
sakes, they've been playing chess a lot longer than us.
I say
Uh,
that to these are the people that invented chess.
yeah. Yeah, people think because they wear turbans and have ZZ
No,
Top beards that they're stupid. I'm like, no, they're
no,
not stupid.
no, they're not at all. No, they're not at all. So on this side over here is Hezbollah, Hamas, God knows what factors and what the so-called Arab man in the street are thinking right now. And Biden clearly is, like you said, did you see that clip the other week where he said, "Stop, stand up," and he said, "I want to go to bed"? Did you see that one?
No, I
That
missed
was
that
like,
one.
oh, good. He goes, "I want to go to bed." And I said, "Yeah, me and you, Joe." But so there's a question in there somewhere. What's next?
Well, I mean, Israel's going to keep going with this. I mean, you could only avoid so many civilian casualties, especially when they have arms caches under hospitals, which of course is a violation of the laws of war. So I think Israel's doing the best they can to avoid civilian casualties, but clearly you can't avoid them, and they have to go in and root out Hamas, but they're not going to do it with the Air Force. You can't go into
Oh,
tunnels with an F-15, right? So Israel's going to see this through. Hamas, of course, what's really despicable about this, one of the many despicable things about this, Peter, is the Hamas leadership is in other countries.
oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
so, checking their bank accounts
Oh,
while the foot soldiers die for them. But Israel's got to do something about the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, over in the West Bank, you've got the 88-year-old leader of the Palestinian Authority who hasn't had a free election forever because he's afraid he'll lose to
oh.
Hamas, which he might. I don't know. Um,
How much of this, the so-called 2-for-1 sale? I kill one of these PLO guys or Hamas characters or whomever, and it's replaced almost automatically by two. And one of the parts of the Pentagon Papers was the conclusion: you can't beat the birth rate.
no, no, there's that. That's the big problem with Israel, right? And
Yeah,
that's why it is in their long-term interest to do something about letting there be a separate Palestinian state where they don't have the people in their territory.
yeah,
But I don't know how you get there. I really don't know how you get there with all of the political opposition, particularly from the conservative parties and the settlers in Israel. I
hmm,
mean, nobody settles in Gaza, but in the
no,
West Bank. I mean, I
yeah,
don't think you can really solve the West Bank issue without solving the Gaza issue and vice versa. Um, but again, you basically got two different Palestinian governments you're dealing
yeah,
with. One is lukewarm, hostile toward Israel. The one is burning hot, hostile toward Israel.
yeah.
And in Israel, look, again, to acknowledge that Palestinians have legitimate issues doesn't mean that Israel's not stuck in a sticky wicket, because they really are. And I don't know, I honestly don't know what they're going to do about it. But I think that there would be breathing space and a chance to do something about it if they got Iran out of the equation, because Iran is the one arming most of the people opposed to them.
But
And
again, I watched the so-called Republican candidates debate. Well, they were all bloodthirsty right down the line. I mean, I
well,
go
except for
there.
Ramaswamy,
What do you do with him? Sidebar.
you know, smartest guy in the room, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to be president. I
No,
mean,
I
you know,
don't think so.
but
I,
he's a smart guy and says a lot of interesting stuff. I just cannot get that image out of my head now, and I blame him, of Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels. I'm
yeah.
just stuck with that
Ooh,
image. I'm
ooh,
trying to, bleach my brain and get that out of there.
ooh, ooh,
But
ooh. Huh?
yeah,
There.
those two really going at it. My wife today, my wife's very savvy about politics. She says, I think Nikki Haley will be Trump's vice president. That's what she said.
Trump can't win, and Biden can't.
Probably not.
Biden won't be there. So
Right.
if we want to change in policy, I don't know who I saw in that line that I would think, well, you'd be best to deal with this. I, and I'm too jaded anyhow. But
Well, well, I mean, at least DeSantis has been there, right? He was a JAG officer in
yeah,
Iraq, so
no,
he has a
yeah,
little
right, yeah.
direct experience in that regard. So, but
How
he's
does
not
it
going to
end?
get. It looks like he's not going to get the nomination. So,
No, no, no. So one more. How does this end? Because it can't. In other words, the the Israelis can't occupy. They can't occupy Gaza. It'll be a protracted. It'll be the battle for Fallujah every day.
right, right,
So they can't do that.
right.
And you look, how does it end? It's yesterday repeating itself.
I think it ends with a whimper and a bang again, without a
Ooh,
whimper and not a bang again. I think
yeah,
they go in there, they attrit Hamas as much as they can. They kill as
yeah.
many of the leadership as they can. They fill up the tunnels as much as they can. They destroy their armed caches as much as they can, and then they go back. We can go back to the status quo ante and wait for the next eruption.
It seems like every 10 years it blows, and blows big.
Yeah, it seems like it.
And how I watch this stuff, and then you reading history as you know better than I. The past is the teller for the future, and even if this ends with and by the way, I was going to ask you one more. Now these massive demonstrations, although there was a huge pro-Israel demonstration in D.C., across the world, there are now demonstrations against Israel. When has Israel become the bad guy in this?
Well, for the left, certainly.
Yeah,
For the left, certainly. And I have a strong suspicion, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I have a strong suspicion that there's Soros money behind a lot of these demonstrations.
then
But
again,
yeah, yeah. But isn't it amazing, Pete? The left has been for years now, ever since Trump came down the escalator, trying to paint the right wing as the haters and the anti-Semitic people. And actually, no, it's not. It's actually the left that is anti-Semitic now. And
what's
again,
in, what's interesting about that is if you're a reader, and you are, they're both Semites.
oh,
So
I know. Yes, when you say anti-Semitic, you should say anti-Arab too. But the
yeah,
accepted parlance.
yeah, right, but no one goes, isn't it true that?
Mhm.
And again, I watched the man in the street with a microphone. He's got his arm around somebody, and they're talking. And then I also thought that Cornell University is Heidelberg in 1935. They're
Isn't that
that's
every Ivy League school?
well the most well the probably and yet why after a dozen years of political correctness,
Yeah.
this ugly dragon comes up out of that.
Well, intersectionality, which of course is Marxist. This attempt to say that every marginalized group is, they're all united together. Have you ever seen these things, Gays for
Yeah,
Palestine?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
good luck with that one.
Well, I said that we have a prominent gay couple here in Colorado and I said, here's what I want you guys to do. I was going to do a fundraiser and buy them both a one-way ticket
to kick it
to
to Gaza.
one way, because I didn't care where.
Yeah.
And when you get off, and they're both of them happen to be Jewish,
Right.
and you come down the ramp, holding hands, and say, "We are married, we're gay, we're Jewish, and we're here to help you."
Right.
You'll be hucked off a rooftop.
Prepare for the roof party. Right. Yes. It's
Man.
just
Leave us with something.
the ignorance is stunning.
Oh,
Peter, I don't know. I mean, part of this is simply the ineptitude and the weakness of our current administration. Oh, say what you will about Trump, and there's a lot of negative to be said about Trump. Iran did not goad Hamas into doing this when Trump was president, because remember what happened to Qasem Soleimani. He went to meet what he thought was the virgins, and I suspect it was something much more unpleasant.
wow.
So they weren't doing this under Trump, because Trump had a
Well,
had a firm foreign policy that said we're not going to put up with this stuff. So I don't know. Do we get another president like that? I don't know. Like you said, I'm not optimistic about some of the people on the Republican side, but we certainly know that if another Democrat's in, they're not going to be any different than they may be more cogent, but I'm not sure the policies are going to be any different than Biden.
and remember, when the second that Ronald Reagan was sworn in, the Ayatollah released the hostages.
The hostages were flying out, right?
And
yes, the second.
and I mean, that's my guy, the double R. But and
Yeah.
I don't know. You're absolutely right. All of this has happened before,
Yeah.
and tragically will probably happen again.
The big thing, Pete, is this time, however, I think in the past, when America's much stronger and Russia and China were not challenging us like they do now, this was sort of a theater thing, right? Well, this is happening in the Middle East, but it's not really connected so much to what's going on across the world.
It's always
Now,
connected.
as you were talking about earlier, now it's a part. Basically, there are three blocks, BLOCS, three civilizational blocks that are opposed to what the West is doing.
Yeah.
It's the Russians, mainly from Orthodox Christian nationalism, the Chinese from communism and Chinese nationalism, and the Islamic world.
Yeah.
And basically, those three are working really, in many ways, against us because they're tired of the West imposing their values on the rest of the world. That's really the big picture of what's going on.
That's reading Osama's letter to America. That's
A stop clock is right twice a day, right?
But and now young people are reading it and they're finding themselves in agreement. And I say one more. If Saddam were alive and the Bush and Cheney people had not done what they did, and Saddam were still in power in Baghdad, would the mullahs be acting as they are? Would the things be happening as they are? With Saddam still? I agree with you. What Bush and Cheney did was
they empowered Iran. Yes, they totally empowered Iran. And then Osama or Obama.
Yeah.
Obama and Biden have, basically, ironically, done that to the nth degree now.
ISIS is George Bush's Frankenstein.
In many ways, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's good to see you. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. We'll talk ASAP. Dr. Tim Furnish, any final comment you want to make?
No, like I said, just again, pray for Paris Jones from University of Virginia, who needs everyone prayers. And thank you, Peter.
Best to your family. Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. See you Saturday down the hall on 710 KNUS at 9 o'clock. Couple hours. New evidence on the Kennedy assassination that day in Dealey Plaza. Thanks, Mark Crowley. I'll see you then.